There are moments in a human life when prayer feels less like speech and more like a sigh, when words thin out and hope seems to whisper rather than shout. You have known such moments. They arrive quietly, often at night, when the world has settled and the soul begins its honest conversation with God. It is there, in that private chamber of the heart, that the question forms, not always boldly, sometimes barely at all, "Have you heard me?" And if we are truthful, we ask it not once but many times, with the persistence of those who love deeply and fear disappointment even more. We imagine answers arriving in familiar shapes, dressed in our expectations, speaking our language, obeying our timelines. But God, who is never confined by our small maps of reality, answers in ways that do not merely meet expectation but overturn it. We often suppose that if God were to answer us clearly, it would be in a manner we could immediately recognize, like a letter addressed in neat handwriting, or a voice that leaves no room for doubt. Yet history and scripture, and the quieter testimony of lived faith tell us otherwise. God delights in answering prayers in ways that enlarge the soul, rather than simply soothe it. He responds not only to the words we speak, but to the deeper longings we scarcely know how to name. And when he does, the answer can arrive with such weight, such unexpected beauty or power, that language itself falters. We find ourselves, quite literally, speechless. Consider how often we pray for relief, while God prepares restoration. We ask for escape, while he intends transformation. We plead for the removal of pain, while he plans to use that very pain as the doorway through which strength, wisdom, and compassion will enter. It is not cruelty that shapes such answers, but love far more serious than our comfort. A lesser love might grant our requests exactly as we frame them. A greater love answers the prayer beneath the prayer, the one spoken not by the lips, but by the soul's deepest hunger. There is a strange humility required to recognize that we are poor judges of our own good. We know what hurts. We are less certain of what heals. God sees not only the present ache, but the future glory. Not only the immediate struggle, but the person you are becoming through it. And so his answers often arrive sideways, clothed in circumstances we did not ask for, sometimes even resisted. Only later, when we look back, do we realize that what seemed like silence was in fact preparation, and what felt like delay was mercy at work beyond our sight. You may have prayed for years for something that has not yet appeared. The waiting has worn thin your patience and tempted you to believe that heaven has grown distant. But waiting, in the economy of God, is never wasted time. It is a workshop. It is there that trust is hammered into shape, that faith learns to walk without crutches, that hope is purified of shallow demands. When God answers after such a season, the answer carries a depth that could never have been received earlier. It does not merely solve a problem, it reshapes a life. There are answers from God that arrive like thunder, unmistakable and overwhelming. There are others that come like dawn, quietly banishing darkness without ceremony. Both can leave you speechless, not because they are loud, but because they are right. They fit the soul with a precision that feels almost unsettling, as though God has reached into the most private corners of your being and set things in order. In those moments, gratitude often precedes explanation. The heart knows before the mind can articulate. We must also admit that sometimes God answers by saying no, or not yet, and even this, when rightly understood, can leave us without words. For a refusal from God is not the closing of a door without reason, it is the redirection of a journey toward a better country. Many have looked back on prayers unanswered and discovered that what they begged for would have diminished them, narrowed their love, or confined their calling. The no of God can be a hidden yes to something far greater, something the soul would not have dared to request. There is a danger in treating prayer as a transaction, as though faith were a currency exchanged for blessings. Such thinking reduces God to a means rather than the end, and it shrinks prayer into a tool for self-advancement. True prayer is not about persuading God to align with our will, but about being drawn, sometimes painfully, into alignment with His. When that alignment occurs, the answers that follow are not merely satisfying, they are sanctifying. They make us more fully alive, more deeply human, and more aware of the sacredness woven into ordinary days. Think of the countless times God has already answered you without announcement. You were protected from dangers you never saw, strengthened for trials you thought would break you, comforted by grace that arrived just in time. These answers did not always feel miraculous in the moment, yet they were no less divine. If God has been faithful in such quiet ways before, is it unreasonable to trust Him now, even when the answer you await seems delayed? There comes a point in the life of faith when one realizes that the greatest answers from God are not always events, but revelations. He answers by revealing Himself more clearly, by drawing nearer, by making His presence undeniable in the midst of uncertainty. Such an answer can render all lesser questions temporarily irrelevant. When the soul encounters God not merely as an idea but as a living reality, explanations give way to worship, and words fall silent before wonder. Do not underestimate what God is capable of doing with your story. The chapters that confuse you now may one day become the testimony that strengthens others. The prayers you whisper in weakness may be the very ones God uses to display His strength most clearly. When He answers, it may not be in the form you imagined, but it will bear His signature, marked by truth, love, and a wisdom that reaches beyond your years. There is a kind of holy surprise that belongs to the Christian life, a readiness to be astonished by grace. God is not bound by the patterns we have observed or the limits we have assumed. He answers in ways that disrupt our categories, that force us to expand our understanding of what is possible. And when such an answer arrives, it does more than resolve a question. It invites us into deeper trust, calling us to live differently in light of what we have seen. If you are tempted to believe that your prayers have been forgotten, remember that God's memory is not like ours. He does not misplace, overlook, or neglect. Every sincere prayer is held within His will, and every answer is shaped by a love that sees the end from the beginning. When the answer finally comes, and it will, it may arrive with such clarity, such unexpected goodness, that the only honest response will be silence. A silence filled not with confusion but with awe, as the soul recognizes that it has been heard all along, and that what God has done is far greater than what it dared to ask. That silence, when it comes, is not empty. It is the hush that falls over a room when something sacred has occurred, when even the most talkative heart senses that words would only cheapen the moment. It is the kind of silence you feel when you realize that God has been working, long before you noticed, arranging details with a patience that outlasts your fear and a precision that exposes how little you truly understood your own need. In that silence, faith matures. It no longer demands proof in advance, because it has encountered faithfulness in retrospect. You begin to see that God's answers often carry a double edge. They address your situation while also addressing you. They change circumstances, yes, but they also change vision. You start to recognize how narrow your prayers once were, how bound to immediacy, how concerned with relief rather than renewal. And you do not feel ashamed of this realization. Instead, you feel gently corrected, like a child who has asked for a candle when the sun was already rising. There is a deep kindness in the way God allows us to reach the end of ourselves before revealing the fullness of His response. Self-sufficiency, after all, is one of the greatest barriers to wonder. As long as we believe we can manage life with our own strength and strategy, God's involvement seems optional. But when that illusion collapses, when we finally admit our poverty of spirit, we discover that we are standing at the threshold of grace. And grace, when it moves openly, does not whisper apologies for our weakness. It transforms weakness into the stage upon which divine power is displayed. You may have noticed that God rarely answers by removing every difficulty at once. Instead, He often answers by giving you a courage you did know. He possessed before, a peace that does not depend on outcomes, a clarity that survives confusion. These are answers that cannot be measured quickly or displayed easily, yet they are among the most profound. They do not fade when circumstances shift. because they are rooted not in the world's stability but in God's character. When God answers in this way, the world may see nothing remarkable. Others may not even recognize that anything has changed. But you sense it in the way fear loosens its grip, in the way despair no longer has the final word, in the way hope returns not as naive optimism but as a settled confidence. This inner transformation is often the prelude to outward change, preparing you to receive future blessings without being destroyed by them or defined by them. There is also a mystery in the timing of God's answers that challenges our modern impatience. We live in an age of immediacy, where delay is treated as failure and waiting as a flaw. Yet God is never rushed, and His purposes are never late. What feels slow to you may be perfectly paced according to an eternal clock. When the answer finally comes, you may realize that if it had arrived earlier, you would not have recognized its value or trusted its source. It is worth considering that God's answers are shaped not only by what you ask, but by who you are becoming. He is more concerned with forming your soul than with satisfying your preferences. This does not mean He is indifferent to your pain or dismissive of your desires. On the contrary, it means He takes them seriously enough to answer them in ways that lead to lasting good rather than temporary comfort. Sometimes God answers by opening a door you never knocked on. You prayed for one thing and He provided another that proved far better. At first, this can feel disorienting, even disappointing. But as you step through that unexpected door, you begin to understand that God's imagination exceeds yours. He sees possibilities you have ruled out, futures you have not dared to envision. When you finally grasp what He has done, gratitude overtakes explanation, and you are left marveling at how limited your original request had been. There are also answers that arrive through people, a conversation you did not plan, a word spoken at just the right moment, a presence that steadies you when everything else feels unstable. These are not coincidences disguised as kindness, they are deliberate acts of God's providence. When you look back and trace the threads, you realize how carefully those encounters were woven into your story. And again, the realization steals your speech, because it reveals a God who is intimately involved in the details of your life. You may fear that your prayers are too small, too repetitive, or too weary to matter. But God does not measure prayer by eloquence or novelty. He listens for sincerity, for the quiet persistence of a heart that refuses to give up entirely, even when hope is thin. The very act of continuing to pray, despite disappointment, is itself a form of faith. And faith, however fragile it feels, is never ignored by God. There is a profound difference between an answer that merely satisfies curiosity and one that reshapes destiny. God specializes in the latter. His answers often redirect lives, alter priorities, and redefine success. What once seemed essential may lose its hold, while what once seemed secondary becomes central. This reordering can be unsettling at first, but it brings a freedom that superficial answers never could. As you walk forward, carrying both unanswered questions and unexpected graces, you begin to trust not just in God's ability to answer, but in His wisdom regarding how and when to do so. This trust does not eliminate longing, but it purifies it. You still desire, but you no longer demand. You hope, but you no longer despair. You wait, but the waiting itself becomes an act of worship rather than a burden. There will be moments when you are tempted to compare your journey with others, to measure God's faithfulness by the speed or visibility of His answers. Resist this temptation. God's work in each life is uniquely tailored, shaped by personal history, hidden wounds, and specific callings. What looks like delay in one story may be preparation in another. When God answers you, it will be in a way that fits your life so precisely that comparison will lose its appeal. One day, perhaps unexpectedly, you will realize that the prayer you have carried for so long has been answered. Not all at once, not dramatically, but thoroughly. You will see how each step, each apparent detour, each season of silence contributed to a result more complete than you imagined. And in that realization, gratitude will rise not as a polite response, but as an overwhelming recognition of grace. You may find yourself unable to explain to others exactly what God has done. Words will feel insufficient, too small to contain the truth, and that too is part of the answer. God's work in a soul is not always meant to be neatly summarized or easily shared. Some testimonies are lived more than spoken, revealed through changed character, renewed hope, and a quiet confidence that endures hardship. The God who answers in ways that leave you speechless is not distant or unpredictable. He is consistent in his love, faithful in his promises, and creative in his mercy. He knows how to surprise without confusing, how to humble without crushing, how to bless without spoiling. His answers may challenge your expectations, but they will never betray his goodness. And so you continue to pray, not because you are certain of how God will respond, but because you are certain of who he is. You pray with open hands rather than clenched fists, with trust rather than control. You learn to listen as much as you speak, to watch as much as you ask. In this posture, you become ready, not just for an answer, but for the God who gives it, whose ways are deeper than your fears and whose responses, when they finally unfold in their fullness, carry a weight of glory that no human language can fully contain, leaving the heart hushed, the mind humbled, and the soul standing on the edge of wonder, still learning how to receive what it has been seeking all along. That wonder does not fade quickly. It lingers, quietly reshaping the way you see ordinary days, turning familiar moments into reminders of a larger story unfolding beyond your awareness. You begin to notice how even unanswered prayers have softened you, how disappointment has carved out a deeper capacity for compassion, how longing has taught you to recognize grace when it finally arrives. In this light, nothing is wasted. Even the tears you thought fell unnoticed have watered the soil from which stronger faith has grown. There is a temptation, once an answer begins to take shape, to rush ahead, to claim certainty too soon, to speak before the work is complete. But God often continues answering long after we think the conversation is finished. His responses unfold in layers, revealing meaning over time, as though he knows we could not bear the full weight of understanding all at once. What he shows you today prepares you for what he will reveal tomorrow, each insight building upon the last with quiet patience. As this unfolds, you may realize that some of your most fervent prayers were never about changing God's mind, but about allowing him to change yours. You prayed for Shion, and he taught you dependence. You prayed for clarity, and he taught you trust. You prayed for certainty, and he taught you faith. These lessons are not easily summarized, but they are deeply transformative. They alter how you respond to hardship, how you measure success, how you define hope. God's answers also carry an ethical weight. When he blesses, he invites responsibility. When he restores, he calls you to become an agent of restoration for others. An answer from God is never meant to terminate on itself. It flows outward, shaping how you love, forgive, and serve. In this way, his answers multiply, touching lives you may never fully know, extending far beyond the original prayer. You may find that the more clearly God answers you, the more humble you become. Pride has little room to grow in the presence of grace so evident that it defies explanation. Instead of boasting, you find yourself grateful. Instead of claiming credit, you acknowledge dependence. This humility is not self-diminishing, it is liberating. It frees you from the exhausting need to prove yourself and anchors your worth in something far more secure than achievement or approval. There will still be days when doubt creeps in, when memory grows selective and fear attempts to rewrite the narrative. On such days, you will need to remember, not by force but by reflection, how God has answered before. Memory becomes a spiritual discipline, a way of anchoring present uncertainty to past faithfulness. Recollection reinforces the truth that God's silence is never absence, and his delays are never neglect. As time passes, you may notice that prayer itself begins to change. It becomes less about presenting a list of requests and more about cultivating attentiveness. You listen more carefully, not only for God's voice, but for his movement within your circumstances. You learn to discern patterns of grace, to recognize when a closed door is an answer as meaningful as an open one. Prayer matures from transaction to relationship, from urgency to intimacy. It is in this maturity that the most surprising answers often appear. God may fulfill a longing you had almost forgotten, or redeem a loss you had accepted as permanent. These moments arrive quietly, without fanfare, yet they carry immense significance. They remind you that God's timing is not governed by your memory or attention. He does not forget what you once brought before him, even if you have learned to live without mentioning it. The answers that leave you speechless also tend to recalibrate your understanding of power. You begin to see that true power is not always displayed through dramatic intervention, but through sustained faithfulness. God's strength is evident not only in sudden breakthroughs, but in the grace that carries you through ordinary endurance. This redefinition deepens your respect for the quiet heroes of faith, whose lives testify not to constant triumph, but to steady trust. In time you may realize that the greatest miracle was not the change in your circumstances, but the change in you. The anxiety that once dominated your thoughts no longer rules them. The bitterness that once seemed justified has loosened its grip. The fear that once dictated your decisions has been replaced by a cautious but genuine courage. These shifts are subtle, yet profound, and they bear witness to God's answering work in ways that statistics and stories cannot fully capture. There is also a gentleness in God's answers that becomes more apparent as you reflect. He does not overwhelm you with proof or coerce belief through spectacle. He invites trust through consistency, through the quiet accumulation of faithfulness that, over time, becomes undeniable. This approach respects your freedom while nurturing your confidence, allowing faith to grow organically rather than through force. When you look back over the long arc of your prayers, you may be surprised by how coherent the story has become. What once seemed random now appears intentional. What once felt cruel now reveals hidden mercy. This coherence does not erase pain, but it reframes it, placing it within a narrative that makes sense in light of God's character. And in seeing this, you understand that being left speechless is not about lacking words, but about recognizing a truth too expansive to be contained by them. You carry this recognition into the future, knowing there will be new prayers, new seasons of waiting, new moments of uncertainty. Yet you face them differently now. You do not approach God as a stranger or a last resort, but as one whose faithfulness you have tested and found reliable. Even when you do not know what to ask, you trust that God knows what to give. This trust does not eliminate struggle, but it transforms it. Struggle becomes a place of encounter rather than abandonment, a context in which God's answers are slowly, carefully taking shape. You learn to live with anticipation without anxiety, with hope without illusion. And as you continue forward, praying, waiting, and watching, you remain open to the possibility that the next answer God gives, whether dramatic or quiet, immediate or delayed, may once again arrive in such a way that the only honest response is reverent silence, a stillness filled with gratitude, awe, and a deepening awareness that you are held by a wisdom far greater than your own, a wisdom that is even now preparing an answer beyond what you can imagine or articulate, and that will, in its time, reveal itself with a grace that continues to unfold patiently, faithfully, without haste, without waste, drawing you ever deeper into the mystery of being known, heard, and answered by God. So let this be the resting place of your heart, not certainty about outcomes, not confidence in timelines, but trust in the God who answers with perfect wisdom and unshakable love. You may not yet see how every prayer fits together, how every delay serves a purpose, or how every tear has been counted. But you can be sure of this: when God answers you fully, you will recognize His hand not by noise or spectacle, but by the deep rightness of it. It will settle your spirit, humble your understanding, and awaken a gratitude too profound for easy words. And in that moment, standing between remembrance and hope, you will know that you were never ignored, never forgotten, never unheard, but patiently, lovingly, and purposefully led toward an answer shaped not merely to meet your request, but to transform your life, leaving you not empty-handed, but awestruck, quietly worshipful, and finally at peace.